A small voice cut through the noise. "Are you lost too, mister?" the little girl asked the lonely billionaire single dad at the airport. What he did next changed everything. Jackson's head snapped up. A little girl stood 3 feet away, her bright red coat too big for her frame, sleeves covering half her hands. She wore a knit hat with cat ears that flopped when she tilted her head. Her blue eyes were wide, searching his face like she already knew his answer. He blinked twice, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. Lost? He glanced around the terminal as if the question belonged to someone else, but she was staring right at him, her green backpack straps cutting into her small shoulders. "I'm not lost," he said, though his voice came out hollow. He straightened his tie and tried to smile. "Are you?" She nodded slowly, her bottom lip trembling just enough to break something inside him. "My mommy was supposed to be by the fountain, but when I turned around, she wasn't there anymore." Jackson's stomach dropped. He scanned the area instinctively, looking for a frantic parent, a security guard, anyone who might be searching for this child. The terminal buzzed with indifferent strangers rushing past, none of them noticing the little girl standing alone in the middle of it all. He crouched down to her level, his knees cracking slightly as he met her gaze. Up close, he could see the fear she was trying to hide behind her brave face. Her hands twisted the straps of her backpack. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and airplane pretzels. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Izzy," she whispered, and then her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't know where my mommy went." Jackson felt his throat tighten. For a second, he saw Nina's face instead of this stranger's daughter. He imagined his own child lost and terrified, waiting for him to find her. The thought made his hands shake. He reached out and gently touched Izzy's shoulder, grounding himself in the moment. "Okay, Izzy, listen to me." His voice came out steadier than he felt. "We're going to find your mommy together. I promise you that." She stared at him for a long moment, deciding whether to trust this man in the expensive suit who looked just as lost as she felt. Would this little girl's question lead Jackson to something he didn't know he was searching for? Section Izzy slipped her small hand into Jackson's without hesitation, and the weight of it nearly crushed him. Her fingers were warm and sticky, probably from candy she'd eaten earlier. She held on tight like she was afraid he might disappear too. He stood up slowly, keeping her close as travelers bumped past them with rolling suitcases and strollers. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked if they needed help. The world kept moving while this child's world had stopped completely. "Where did you last see her?" Jackson asked, his business voice kicking in, the one he used to solve problems in boardrooms. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was a child, and the stakes were higher than any deal he'd ever closed. Izzy pointed toward the center of the terminal, where a decorative fountain splashed water in rhythmic patterns. Holiday decorations hung from the ceiling, snowflakes and silver ribbons that caught the harsh lighting. "Right there." She told me to sit on the bench and wait, but I got up to look at the coins in the water. Jackson's jaw tightened. It only took seconds for a child to vanish in a place like this. He'd read the statistics, seen the news reports, tried not to think about them every time Nina was out of his sight. They walked together toward the fountain, Izzy's red coat bright against the sea of grays and blacks. She kept pace with him, her little legs working double time to match his stride. He slowed down, adjusting to her rhythm instead of his own. "What does your mommy look like?" he asked, scanning every face they passed. His eyes moved like a security camera, tracking movement, searching for panic, looking for anyone who seemed to be searching back. "She has curly hair," Izzy said, her voice small but clear, dark brown. "And she was wearing a blue sweater. She has a big purse with flowers on it." Jackson filed away the details, his mind already running through possibilities. Maybe she stepped into a restroom. Maybe she went to buy food. Maybe she's at another gate, thinking Izzy followed her. Maybe. "Does your mommy have a phone?" he asked, pulling out his own. "Do you know her number?" Izzy shook her head, fresh tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't remember it. I'm only 5. 5 years old, alone in an airport. Jackson felt rage bubble up in his chest, not at the child, but at a world where this could happen. where people were so wrapped up in their own lives that a little girl could stand crying and nobody stopped. They reached the fountain, and Izzy pointed to a wooden bench near the edge. "That's where I was sitting, right there." Jackson scanned the area with new intensity. The fountain was surrounded by seating, shops, and gates, branching off in 3 directions. Any one of those paths could have taken Izzy's mother away, or taken Izzy in the wrong direction when she stood up. He knelt beside her again, keeping his voice calm even though his pulse was racing. "Izzy, I need you to think really hard. Did your mommy say anything about where she was going? To get food, to the bathroom, to buy something?" Izzy squeezed his hand tighter, her small face scrunched in concentration. "She said she had to check something. She told me to stay right there and not move." Something. That could mean anything. Jackson stood and looked around again, this time searching for airport staff, security, anyone with a radio or authority. His eyes landed on a customer service desk 20 yards away near Gate 44. "Come on," he said gently, tugging Izzy forward. "We're going to get some help." They walked together through the crowd, Izzy's grip never loosening. Jackson noticed how people's eyes slid right past them, assuming they were father and daughter. Nobody questioned it. Nobody stopped to ask. That realization made his skin crawl. When they reached the desk, a tired woman in a navy blazer looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read Sharon, and her expression said she'd dealt with enough complaints for one day. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone mechanical. "This little girl is lost," Jackson said, his voice firm but polite. "Her mother was supposed to meet her by the fountain, but she's gone. We need to make an announcement and get security involved." Sharon's expression shifted immediately, professionalism replacing exhaustion. She picked up a phone and pressed a button. "Security to the main terminal customer service desk. Code yellow. Repeat, code yellow." Izzy pressed against Jackson's leg, and he rested a hand on her shoulder. She was trembling now, the reality of the situation sinking in. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but he'd learned the hard way that some promises couldn't be kept. All they could do now was wait, and hope that Izzy's mother was searching just as frantically as they were. But what if she wasn't? A uniformed security officer arrived within minutes, a tall black man with kind eyes and a radio clipped to his belt. His name tag read Officer Marcus Hayes. He crouched down to Izzy's level immediately, his voice gentle and practiced. "Hey there, sweetheart, my name is Marcus. Can you tell me your full name?" "Izzy Carter," she said quietly, her fingers still wrapped around Jackson's hand. "I'm 5.5. Marcus smiled. 5.5 is a great age, and you're doing a really brave job right now. Can you tell me your mommy's name?" "Lena Carter." Marcus spoke into his radio, relaying the information while Sharon typed rapidly on her computer. Within seconds, an announcement echoed through the terminal speakers, a calm female voice asking Lena Carter to return to the fountain area immediately. Jackson felt Izzy stiffen beside him. The announcement made it real, made it official. She wasn't just temporarily separated anymore, she was lost. And her mother was being summoned over a PA system like a missing piece of luggage. "How long has she been alone?" Marcus asked, directing the question at Jackson. "I found her about 10 minutes ago," Jackson replied. "She said her mother told her to wait by the fountain, but when she looked up, she was gone." Marcus nodded, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "And you are?" "Jackson Reed. I was just sitting at my gate when she approached me." He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license without being asked. He knew how this looked. A grown man with a child who wasn't his. In today's world, that required explanation. Marcus studied the license briefly, then handed it back. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. I appreciate you staying with her. Most people would have walked away." The words hung heavy in the air. Most people would have walked away. Jackson thought about the hundreds of travelers who'd passed them in the last 10 minutes. Marcus was right, and that was the saddest part of all. "I have a daughter," Jackson said quietly, 6 years old. "I couldn't just leave her." Marcus nodded, understanding passing between them without further words. He turned back to Izzy, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. "Izzy, what was your mommy wearing? Can you describe her for me?" Izzy repeated the details she'd told Jackson. Curly brown hair, Blue sweater, big purse with flowers. Marcus wrote everything down, occasionally speaking into his radio to relay information to other officers spread throughout the terminal. Sharon made another announcement, this one more urgent. Lena Carter, please return to the fountain area in the main terminal immediately. Your daughter is waiting for you. Jackson watched Izzy's face as the words echoed overhead. She looked smaller somehow, like the announcement had shrunk her. Her red coat seemed too bright, too cheerful for the fear radiating off her tiny body. Is my mommy coming? Izzy asked, looking up at Jackson instead of the officer. She trusted him now. He'd become her lifeline in a sea of strangers. She's coming, Jackson said, though he had no way of knowing if that was true. She's probably just as scared as you are right now. Marcus stood and gestured for Jackson to step aside for a moment. They moved a few feet away, still within Izzy's sight but out of earshot. Marcus lowered his voice. We're going to check security footage, see if we can spot the mother. Sometimes they step into a bathroom or a shop and lose track of time. Sometimes. He trailed off, leaving the darker possibilities unspoken. How long before you call the police? Jackson asked. If we don't locate the mother in the next 30 minutes, we'll escalate. Child Protective Services will get involved. But most of these situations resolve quickly. Parents panic, kids wander, everyone reunites with tears and hugs. Most situations, but not all. Jackson thought about the ones that didn't end well, the faces on missing posters, the Amber Alerts that lit up phones in the middle of the night. He glanced back at Izzy. She stood exactly where they'd left her, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the fountain like her mother might materialize from the water if she wished hard enough. I'll stay with her, Jackson said, until her mother shows up. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. I believe you're one of the good ones, Mr. Reed. But I still need to follow protocol. Do you have identification for your daughter? Proof of who you are? Jackson pulled out his phone and showed Marcus his lock screen, a photo of him and Nina at her last birthday party, both of them covered in chocolate frosting and laughing. It was his favorite picture, the last time he remembered feeling genuinely happy. Marcus's expression softened. She looks just like you. Yeah, Jackson said quietly, she does. They returned to Izzy, who immediately reached for Jackson's hand again. Marcus knelt down once more, his voice steady and reassuring. Izzy, we're going to find your mommy, okay? But while we're looking, I need you to stay right here with Mr. Jackson. Can you do that for me? Izzy nodded, her bottom lip trembling again. I just want my mommy. I know, sweetheart. And she wants you too. We're going to make that happen. Marcus stood and spoke into his radio again, requesting backup at the fountain and a review of all security cameras in the area. Sharon continued typing, pulling up passenger manifests and flight information. Jackson led Izzy back to the bench by the fountain and sat down beside her. She climbed up next to him, her little legs dangling off the edge, her red coat bunched up around her waist. She stared straight ahead, watching people walk by, searching every face for the one she needed most. Minutes crawled by like hours. The terminal continued its chaotic rhythm, announcements, rolling luggage, crying babies, impatient travelers. But in their small bubble by the fountain, time moved differently. Every second felt weighted, heavy with waiting. Jackson checked his watch. 15 minutes had passed since he'd found Izzy. 15 minutes since her world had tilted off its axis. He thought about Nina, probably at home with the babysitter right now, watching cartoons and eating dinner. Safe. Accounted for. His. What if Lena Carter never showed up? 25 minutes turned into 30, then 40. 2 more security officers had joined Marcus, all of them speaking in low tones, reviewing footage on a tablet, coordinating searches through different terminals. Jackson caught fragments of their conversations, checked the bathrooms, no sign of her, reviewing gate records, possible she missed her flight. Izzy had gone quiet, not the peaceful quiet of contentment, but the hollow silence of a child who'd cried all her tears and had nothing left. She leaned against Jackson's side, her small body heavy with exhaustion. Her cat-eared hat had slipped sideways, and he gently adjusted it without thinking. Are you hungry? He asked. realizing she probably hadn't eaten in hours. "We could get you something from one of the shops." She shook her head. "My tummy hurts." Fear, Jackson knew. Fear made stomachs hurt. Fear made everything hurt. He remembered the feeling from the day Celine died, how his entire body had become a foreign thing, heavy and disconnected. A woman's voice crackled through Marcus's radio. "We've got her on camera at gate 62, 42 minutes ago. She's on the phone, looks upset, lost sight of her after that." Marcus acknowledged the transmission, then turned to Jackson. "Gate 62 is in Terminal C. That's 2 terminals away from here." "Why would she go there?" Jackson asked, keeping his voice low so Izzy wouldn't hear. "She told her daughter to wait here. Could be a lot of reasons. Wrong gate, emergency call, confusion. We're checking to see if she boarded a flight." Jackson's blood ran cold. "You think she left? Without her daughter?" Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm not saying that, but we have to check every possibility." The implications settled over Jackson like ice water. What kind of mother would board a plane and leave her 5-year-old daughter alone in an airport? But then again, what kind of mother would tell her child to wait and then disappear? He looked down at Izzy, who was staring at the fountain again, her eyes unfocused. She'd stopped searching faces, stopped hoping. That broke something in him. "Izzy," he said gently, "do you have family nearby? Someone we could call, a grandma or grandpa, an aunt or uncle?" She shook her head. "Just Mommy and me. Daddy left when I was a baby." Just Mommy and me. Those 4 words carried the weight of an entire story. Single mother, raising a daughter alone, probably struggling every day to make ends meet. Jackson understood that life. He lived it too. Marcus approached them again, his expression more serious now. "Mr. Reed, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Jackson's stomach clenched. He looked at Izzy. "I'll be right over there, okay? You can see me the whole time. I'm not leaving." She nodded, but grabbed his sleeve before he could stand. "Promise?" "Promise." He walked a few steps away with Marcus, Sharon joining them. The officer's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We found Lena Carter's name on a flight manifest for Chicago. The flight departed from gate 67 30 minutes ago." The words hit Jackson like a physical blow. "She left. She actually left her daughter." "We don't know that for certain yet," Marcus said quickly. "She could have been trying to reach the gate, got confused, thought Izzy was with her. Or someone else picked up her ticket. We're contacting the airline now to confirm if she actually boarded." But the doubt in Marcus's voice was clear. He'd seen too much in this job to be optimistic. People did terrible things. Mothers abandoned children. Fathers disappeared. The world wasn't fair or kind, and airports saw every shade of human behavior. Sharon pulled up something on her computer screen, her lips pressed into a thin line. "There's another issue. We ran her name through the system. Lena Carter has a record, 2 counts of child endangerment from 3 years ago. Charges were dropped, but it's in the system." Jackson felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. "And you're just telling me this now?" "We just found it," Marcus said calmly. "Look, I know how this looks. But we still have to follow procedure. We need to confirm she boarded that plane. If she did, Child Protective Services will take over. If she didn't, we keep searching." Jackson looked back at Izzy. She was counting the tiles on the floor, her lips moving silently, trying to distract herself, trying not to feel the fear that was swallowing her whole. "How long?" he asked. "How long until you know for sure?" 15 minutes, maybe 20. The airline is pulling passenger manifests now. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, another lifetime for a little girl who'd already been waiting an eternity. Jackson walked back to Izzy and sat down beside her. She immediately leaned into him again, seeking comfort from the one constant in her rapidly dissolving world. "Is my mommy coming?" she asked for the 100th time, her voice so small it barely registered above the terminal noise. Jackson swallowed hard. He'd always told Nina the truth, even when it hurt, even when she was too young to fully understand. He believed children deserved honesty. But what truth could he give this child that wouldn't destroy her? "They're still looking," he said carefully. "A lot of people are working very hard to find her." Izzy was quiet for a moment, then, "What if she forgot me?" The question shattered him. What if she forgot me? As if a mother could forget her child like a phone left on a counter or keys dropped in a parking lot. But to a 5-year-old, that explanation made more sense than the alternatives. "Your mommy didn't forget you," Jackson said firmly. "That's not possible. You're her daughter. She loves you." "And where is she?" Jackson had no answer, so he did the only thing he could. He put his arm around Izzy's small shoulders and let her lean against him while they waited to find out if her mother had abandoned her, or if this was just a terrible mistake. But deep down, in the part of him that had learned to expect the worst, Jackson was already preparing for the moment when Izzy's world would shatter completely. What would happen when those 15 minutes were up? The 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. Jackson watched Marcus pace back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, his expression growing darker with each passing second. Other travelers walked by completely unaware that a child's entire future hung in the balance 20 feet away. Izzy had stopped asking questions. She'd curled into Jackson's side, her breathing shallow and quick. He could feel her heartbeat against his ribs, a rabbit-fast rhythm that matched his own. His expensive suit jacket was creased from where she gripped it, but he didn't care. Nothing else mattered except this moment and this child. Sharon typed furiously on her computer, occasionally glancing their direction with an expression Jackson couldn't read. Sympathy? Pity? Professional detachment? He'd worn that same mask in boardrooms when delivering bad news. Steady voice, calm exterior, chaos underneath. His phone buzzed, the babysitter checking in about Nina's bedtime. He typed back a quick response, his fingers shaking slightly. Nina was safe. Nina was loved. Nina would never sit alone in an airport wondering if her father had forgotten her. Marcus ended his call and walked toward them slowly. Too slowly. Jackson recognized that walk. The measured steps of someone about to deliver news nobody wanted to hear. He tightened his arm around Izzy instinctively, as if he could shield her from whatever was coming. The officer crouched down so he was at their eye level. His face had lost its earlier optimism. "Izzy, I need to talk to Mr. Jackson for just a minute. Can you stay right here and watch the fountain for us? Count the coins in the water." Izzy nodded, too tired to protest. She straightened up and fixed her gaze on the fountain's rippling surface. Jackson squeezed her shoulder once, then stood and followed Marcus a few feet away. "She boarded," Marcus said flatly. Lena Carter checked in, went through security, and boarded Flight 847 to Chicago. Passengers confirmed seeing a woman matching her description in seat 23 degrees Celsius. The plane landed 45 minutes ago. The words hit Jackson like a wrecking ball. She left her. She actually left her 5-year-old daughter alone in an airport and got on a plane. Marcus's jaw clenched. "We're trying to reach her now. Chicago police are heading to her listed address, but Mr. Reed, you need to understand what happens next. Child Protective Services is on their way. They'll take custody of Izzy until we can locate her mother or another family member." "CPS?" Jackson's voice came out sharper than intended. "She's terrified." "You're going to hand her over to strangers?" "I don't have a choice. It's protocol for abandoned minors. They'll take her to a temporary facility, make sure she's safe, fed, cared for until we sort this out." Jackson thought about those facilities. Cold rooms, unfamiliar beds, other scared children crying in the dark. He thought about Izzy's face when she realized her mother had chosen to leave her behind. Some wounds never healed, some betrayals carved too deep. "How long until CPS gets here?" he asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. 20 minutes. That's all the time Izzy had left before her life changed forever. Before she learned that the person she trusted most in the world had abandoned her without a second thought. Jackson looked back at the fountain where Izzy sat counting coins, her lips moving silently. She'd stopped trembling. She'd stopped crying. She'd gone completely still, like a rabbit that knows the hawk is circling overhead. "Mr. Reed," Marcus said quietly, "I want to thank you for staying with her. Most people wouldn't have. You gave her comfort when she needed it most. That matters, but it didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like holding an umbrella in a hurricane." Jackson had kept her calm for an hour, and now she'd spend the rest of her childhood wondering why she wasn't enough to make her mother stay. He walked back to the bench and sat down beside Izzy. She immediately leaned against him again, seeking the warmth and safety he represented. He was a stranger she'd known for barely an hour, and somehow He'd become the most stable thing in her world. "Izzy," he said gently, "some very nice people are going to come help you soon. They're going to take care of you while we find your mommy." She looked up at him, her blue eyes too knowing for a 5-year-old. "Is my mommy coming back?" Jackson's throat closed. He couldn't lie to her. Not about this. "I don't know, sweetheart, but these people will make sure you're safe until we figure everything out. Will you come with me?" 4 words. 4 simple words that destroyed him completely. Will you come with me? As if he could. As if the world worked that way. As if love and protection and doing the right thing were enough to override rules and systems and paperwork. "I can't," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I wish I could, but I can't." Izzy nodded, accepting this like she'd accepted everything else. Her mother's absence, the waiting, the fear. She'd learned early that the world was full of things she couldn't control, things that hurt, things that didn't make sense. They sat together in silence, watching travelers rush past, watching families reunite at gates, watching people hug and laugh and go on with their normal lives while Izzy's world collapsed. Jackson thought about Nina, thought about tucking her in tonight, reading her favorite story, kissing her forehead, thought about how lucky they were to have each other, even in their grief. At least they had each other. Marcus's radio crackled. CPS is 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. 180 seconds. Not enough time to fix anything. Not enough time to make this better. Just enough time to say goodbye to a little girl he'd known for an hour, but would remember for the rest of his life. But then, a woman's scream cut through the terminal noise like a knife. "Izzy!" Everyone turned. Marcus grabbed his radio. Sharon stood up from her desk, and Jackson felt Izzy's entire body go rigid against his side. Running toward them, shoving past travelers and luggage and security barriers, was a woman with curly brown hair and a blue sweater. Her face was streaked with tears. Her flower-patterned purse bounced against her hip. Lena Carter had come back. But why? Izzy launched herself off the bench before Jackson could react. Her red coat became a blur as she ran toward the woman, her small legs pumping faster than seemed possible. She collided with Lena Carter so hard they both nearly fell, but Lena caught her, scooping her up and spinning her around. Baby, I'm so sorry," Lena sobbed, her words muffled against Izzy's hair. "I'm so sorry. I thought you were right behind me. I looked back and you were gone. I've been searching everywhere." Izzy wrapped her arms around her mother's neck and cried. Not the quiet, defeated tears from before, but loud, broken sobs that shook her entire body. Relief and fear and anger all mixed together in sounds that made every person within earshot stop and stare. Jackson stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. He'd prepared himself for Izzy's devastation when CPS arrived. He'd braced for her screams when strangers took her away. He hadn't prepared for this. The reunion, the relief, the sudden crash of adrenaline leaving his system all at once. Marcus moved forward, his hand resting on his radio. 2 other security officers flanked him, their expressions cautious. Sharon remained at her desk, phone in hand, probably already on the line with CPS telling them to stand down. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice professional but firm, "I need you to put the child down and show me identification." Lena looked up, confusion cutting through her tears. She held Izzy tighter, protective instinct overriding everything else. "I'm her mother. This is my daughter." "I understand, ma'am. But we received reports that you boarded a flight to Chicago 45 minutes ago. We need to verify your identity and understand what happened here." The color drained from Lena's face. She set Izzy down but kept one hand firmly on her shoulder. "Flight to Chicago? I never— Wait, my ex-husband. Marcus. My ex-husband's name is Marcus Daniels." "Did someone use my ticket?" Marcus's expression shifted slightly. He pulled out his notepad. "Your ex-husband has the same first name as me?" "Yes. I bought that ticket 3 weeks ago for a work conference, but I canceled it. I sent him an email telling him he could have it if he wanted since it was non-refundable. He must have—" She stopped, realization hitting her. "He used my reservation. He showed my ID somehow." "I don't understand how that's possible." Sharon called out from her desk. "Officer Hayes, I'm pulling up the security footage from Gate 67 now." Jackson watched the scene unfold from his position by the bench. Lena Carter didn't look like someone who'd abandoned her child. She looked like someone who'd been running through the airport for the last hour, her hair wild, mascara streaked down her cheeks, her blue sweater wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee. "Ma'am, where have you been?" Marcus asked, his tone softer now but still official. "Your daughter has been alone for over an hour." Lena's hand flew to her mouth. "An hour? Oh, God. I was in the South Terminal. I got a call about my mother. She had a stroke. They rushed her to the hospital. I panicked and ran to find a phone with better reception. When I came back, Izzy wasn't at the bench. I've been running through every terminal, every bathroom, screaming her name." Her voice broke completely. She pulled Izzy close again, her whole body shaking. "I never meant to leave her. I told her to stay put. I was only going to be gone 2 minutes. 2 minutes." Marcus exchanged glances with the other officers. Jackson recognized that look, the calculation happening in real time, weighing story against evidence, measuring truth against protocol. These situations never had clean answers, just shades of gray and judgment calls. "We'll need to verify all of this," Marcus said. "Hospital records, phone logs, security footage, and we still have to file a report about the child being unattended." Lena nodded frantically. "Whatever you need, I'll give you everything. Just please, please don't take her from me. She's all I have." Izzy pressed her face into her mother's sweater, her small hands gripping the fabric. She'd stopped crying but hadn't let go, wouldn't let go. Jackson understood that feeling, the desperate need to hold on to something before it disappeared again. Sharon waved Marcus over to her computer screen. They both studied something Jackson couldn't see, their voices too low to hear. After a moment, Marcus nodded and returned to Lena. "The footage shows a man using your ticket at gate 67. He had identification, but from this angle, we can't confirm it was your ID or his own. We're going to need to investigate that further. But right now, I need you to prove you're Lena Carter." Lena fumbled with her flower-patterned purse, pulling out a wallet. Her hands shook as she opened it, extracting her driver's license and handing it to Marcus. He studied it carefully, comparing the photo to the woman in front of him. "This is you," he confirmed. "Now I need to verify Izzy is your daughter. Birth certificate, custody papers, something official." "I don't carry her birth certificate," Lena said, her voice rising with fresh panic. "Who carries that to an airport?" "But I have photos, I have—" "Mom's phone has pictures of us," Izzy said suddenly, her voice muffled against Lena's sweater. "From my birthday. And from when we went to the beach." Lena pulled out her phone with shaking hands and unlocked it. Her screen showed dozens of photos. Izzy blowing out candles, Izzy building sandcastles, Izzy sleeping with a stuffed rabbit, mother and daughter making silly faces at the camera. Years of memories compressed into digital proof of love. Marcus scrolled through several photos, his expression softening with each swipe. "Okay, this is enough for now. But Miss Carter, you need to understand how serious this is. Your daughter was alone in a public place for over an hour. That's—" "No," Lena's voice came out broken. "I know what I did. I know how bad this is. My mother was dying. I thought she was dying, and I just reacted. I didn't think. I should have taken Izzy with me. I should have—" She couldn't finish. The weight of what almost happened crushed the words before they could form. Jackson saw it in her face. The nightmare scenarios, the what-ifs, the terrible knowledge that her 2 minutes of panic could have cost her everything. Marcus sighed, the sound heavy with years of seeing families torn apart by smaller mistakes than this. "I'm going to need you to come down to the security office and fill out some paperwork. We'll call the hospital to verify your mother's condition, and CPS will likely follow up within 48 hours. Lena nodded, tears streaming down her face again. "Thank you. Thank you so much." For the first time since bursting into the terminal, Lena looked past Marcus and her daughter. Her eyes landed on Jackson, still standing by the bench where Izzy had spent the last hour. Their gazes locked and something passed between them. Gratitude, recognition, something neither could name. "You," Lena said softly, taking a step toward him while keeping Izzy's hand firmly in hers. "You were with her." Jackson nodded, suddenly unsure what to say. "She asked if I was lost too. I couldn't just walk away." Lena's face crumpled. Fresh tears spilled over as she closed the distance between them. "You stayed with her, This whole time you stayed with my baby when I... She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Jackson understood every word she couldn't say. He'd done what any parent would want a stranger to do for their lost child. He'd been the safety net when her world fell apart. She's a brave kid, Jackson said quietly, looking down at Izzy. She was scared, but she held it together. Izzy looked up at him, her blue eyes red-rimmed but clear. You promised you'd help me find my mommy. You kept your promise. 4 simple words from a 5-year-old, and Jackson felt something shift in his chest. He'd kept his promise. In a world where promises got broken every day, where people left and didn't come back, where loss was the only guarantee, he'd kept his promise to a little girl who'd asked for help. Lena reached out and touched Jackson's arm, the gesture brief but meaningful. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. Someone would have helped her, Jackson said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Not after watching hundreds of people walk past them without a second glance. But you did. Lena's voice was firm, despite the tears. You did help her, and that means everything. Marcus cleared his throat. Carter, we need to get that paperwork started. The sooner we document everything, the better this looks for you. Lena nodded, reluctantly pulling her attention away from Jackson. She squeezed Izzy's hand.
Come on, baby. We have to go talk to these nice officers for a little while.
Izzy looked back at Jackson, uncertainty crossing her face. She'd just been reunited with her mother, but saying goodbye to the stranger who'd been her anchor felt wrong somehow. Like closing a door she wasn't ready to close. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, she said quietly, for not being lost with me. The words hit harder than they should have, for not being lost with me. But the truth was he had been lost. He'd been lost for 6 years, wandering through his own life, going through motions, existing without living, and for 1 hour, helping this little girl find her way home. He'd felt something close to purpose again. You're welcome, Izzy, he said, his voice rough. Take care of your mom, okay? She nodded solemnly, then let Lena lead her toward the security office, but before they disappeared, around the corner, Lena looked back one more time. Her eyes met Jackson's across the crowded terminal, and he saw something there that made his breath catch. Recognition of a shared pain, understanding of what it meant to be alone even when surrounded by people. Then they were gone, swallowed by the crowd, and Jackson stood alone by the fountain where this had all started. But something had changed, something he couldn't name yet, but felt in every cell of his body. What kind of person walks away from a moment like that unchanged? Jackson didn't walk away, not immediately. He stood by the fountain for several minutes, watching the coins shimmer beneath the water's surface. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one representing a wish someone thought was worth the price of spare change. His phone buzzed. The babysitter again, asking about Nina's medication schedule. He responded mechanically, his mind still replaying the last hour. Izzy's small hand in his, her question about being lost. The moment Lena appeared and everything changed. He should have felt relief. The crisis had resolved itself. Mother and daughter were reunited. His good deed was done. He could board his flight, return to his carefully controlled life, and forget this ever happened. That's what people did. They moved on. But his feet wouldn't move. Something kept him rooted to that spot by the fountain. Like his body knew something his mind hadn't caught up to yet. Mr. Reed? He turned. Sharon from the customer service desk stood a few feet away, holding a piece of paper. Her expression had softened from its earlier professional distance. Miss Carter wanted me to give you this, she said, extending the paper. Before security took her back for questioning, Jackson took it. A phone number written in shaky handwriting, the digits barely legible. Below it, a single sentence, "Thank you for saving my daughter's life. Lena." He stared at the words. Saving her life felt dramatic. He just sat with her, kept her calm, made sure she wasn't alone. Anyone could have done it. But the truth was no one else had. He'd been the one who stopped, the one who stayed. She seemed pretty determined that you have that, Sharon said. Kept asking me 3 times to make sure I gave it to you before you left. Did she say why? Sharon shrugged. I think she just wants to thank you properly. Once all this settles down and she's not worried about CPS taking her kid. Jackson folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He told himself he'd probably never call it. What would he even say? The moment was over. They were strangers who'd shared a crisis, nothing more. But his fingers kept touching the paper through his pocket, making sure it was still there. "Your flight board's in 20 minutes, Sharon added, checking her computer screen. "Gate 47. You should probably head over there." Should. He absolutely should. Nina was waiting at home, work was waiting, his entire carefully structured life was waiting for him to step back into it and resume the routine. Instead, he found himself asking, what happens to them now? Lena and Izzy? Sharon's expression grew more serious. Honestly, depends on what security finds. If her story checks out, hospital records, phone logs, everything she said, they'll probably let her go with a warning and a mandatory follow-up with child services. If there are inconsistencies, or if CPS thinks the child is at risk. She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Jackson understood the system well enough. One mistake could unravel an entire life. One moment of panic could cost a mother her child, even if that mother loved her daughter more than anything. "She loves her," Jackson said quietly. "Izzy. You could see it in her face when she found her. Love doesn't always protect kids from bad decisions," Sharon replied, her voice gentle but firm. "But yeah, I saw it too. For what it's worth, I think she's telling the truth. I've worked here 15 years. You learned to spot the ones who are lying." Jackson nodded. He'd developed the same instinct in business, reading people, spotting deception, knowing when someone was selling a story versus telling the truth. Lena Carter had been telling the truth, every word, every tear, every desperate promise to never let it happen again. His phone buzzed again. This time a work email marked urgent. A client needed documents by tomorrow morning. A deal was falling through. His presence was required immediately. The weight of his real life crashed back over him. He'd stepped out of his routine for 1 hour, and already everything was demanding his return. This was why people didn't stop to help. This was why they walked past lost children and homeless veterans and anyone else who needed something they didn't have time to give. Because the world didn't stop spinning just because you decided to care about something. "I have to go," he said, more to himself than Sharon. "I have a flight to catch." She nodded, already turning back to her desk. Another crisis would arrive within the hour. Another family would need help. Another lost child would cry by the fountain. The airport never stopped moving. Neither did life. Jackson walked toward his gate, weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. His carry-on rolled smoothly behind him. His boarding pass was in his hand. Everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as it had been 2 hours ago before a little girl in a red coat asked if he was lost too. But the paper in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He reached Gate 47 with 10 minutes to spare. The boarding area was crowded with business travelers like himself. Expensive suits, tired eyes, phones pressed to ears. Everyone going somewhere, no one really present. He found an empty seat and sat down, pulling out his phone to check those urgent emails. The words on the screen blurred. He read the same sentence 3 times without understanding it. His mind kept drifting back to Izzy's face when her mother appeared. The pure joy mixed with residual fear, the way she'd looked back at him before disappearing, like she was memorizing his face just in case. Now boarding Group A for Flight 293 to Newark. Jackson stood automatically, joining the line of passengers shuffling toward the gate. He handed over his boarding pass. The agent scanned it. He walked down the jetway toward the plane. Each step took him further from the fountain, from Izzy, from the hour that had felt more real than anything he'd experienced in 6 years. He found his seat, first class, window, exactly what he always booked. The leather was soft. The legroom was generous. A flight attendant offered him champagne. He accepted it, settled into his seat, and watched other passengers file past. A woman with a young daughter moved down the aisle. The girl wore a pink backpack and held her mother's hand tightly. She looked about Nina's age, about Izzy's age, just a child going somewhere with her parent, safe and loved and oblivious to how quickly that could all disappear. Jackson pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. He should text the babysitter with his arrival time. He should respond to those work emails. He should do 100 things that actually mattered to his real life. Instead, He opened a new message and stared at the empty field. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket and carefully entered Lena Carter's number. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. What would he even say? Hey, glad your daughter's okay? Sorry your ex-husband stole your identity to board a plane? Thanks for the reminder that some people are still capable of genuine emotion? The plane door sealed shut. The flight attendant made the safety announcement. Phones were supposed to be in airplane mode now. He should put his away. He should focus on the flight, on work, on getting home to Nina. But his thumbs were already typing. This is Jackson Reed from the airport. I'm glad you found each other. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. Jay. He read it 3 times, almost deleted it twice, then hit send before he could overthink it further. The message showed as delivered, then read. 3 dots appeared immediately. The plane began rolling away from the gate. He switched his phone to airplane mode before her response could come through. Maybe that was better. Maybe this was just meant to be a moment, not a connection. Maybe. But as the plane lifted off and Atlanta grew smaller beneath him, Jackson realized something had fundamentally shifted. He'd spent 6 years walking through life like a ghost in his own story. He'd built walls so thick that nothing could hurt him, which also meant nothing could reach him. And then a 5-year-old girl in a cat-eared hat had asked him a simple question. Are you lost too, mister? The answer was yes. He'd been lost for 6 years, lost in grief and routine, and the hollow comfort of emotional distance. Lost in the safe space where nothing mattered enough to cause pain. But today, for 1 hour, he'd been found, by a child who needed help, by a crisis that demanded presence, by a moment that refused to let him hide behind his carefully constructed walls. The question now was whether he'd learned anything from it, whether he'd let this moment change him, or whether he'd land in Newark, return to his routine, and forget that for 60 minutes he'd actually felt alive again. He closed his eyes and saw Izzy's face, heard her voice, felt her small hand in his, and knew with absolute certainty that forgetting was no longer possible. What would Lena's message say when he landed? The plane touched down in Newark 2 hours later, and Jackson's phone exploded with notifications the moment he took it off airplane mode. Work emails, text messages, voicemails. The world demanding his attention, as always, but his thumb scrolled past all of them, searching for one message in particular. There, 3 messages from an unknown number. The first, thank you so much for staying with Izzy. I still can't believe a complete stranger cared more about my daughter in that moment than I was able to. I'll never forget what you did. The second, security cleared everything. Hospital confirmed my mother's stroke. They're keeping her for observation, but she's stable. CPS is doing a home visit next week, but Marcus thinks it'll be fine. Izzy is safe. We're safe. Because of you. The third, sent an hour later, I'm sorry for unloading on you. You probably don't want to hear about my problems, but I needed you to know that what you did today mattered. You saved us both. Jackson read all 3 messages twice, his chest tightening with each word. He should send a polite response, wish her well, close this chapter. That was the reasonable thing to do, the smart thing. Instead, he typed, I'm glad your mother is stable, and you didn't unload. You went through something terrifying. How is Izzy doing? He hit send, collected his bag from the overhead bin, and filed off the plane with the other passengers. By the time he reached the terminal, his phone buzzed with her response. She's scared to let me out of her sight. We're staying in a hotel near the hospital tonight. She made me promise I wouldn't leave the room, even to get ice. I think I broke something in her today. I don't know how to fix it. Jackson stopped walking. Other travelers flowed around him like water around a stone. He stood in the middle of the terminal, reading those words over and over. I broke something in her today. I don't know how to fix it. He understood that feeling. He'd felt it every day since Celine died, watching Nina's eyes follow him around the house, terrified he'd disappear too. Children weren't supposed to learn about loss that young. They weren't supposed to understand that the people they loved could vanish without warning. His fingers moved before his brain could stop them. You didn't break her. She's scared because she loves you. That fear comes from love, not damage. My daughter was the same age when my wife died. She used to wake up every hour to make sure I was still there. It gets better. Not quickly, but it does." He sent it, then immediately regretted the personal disclosure. He didn't talk about Celine. He didn't share his grief with strangers. He'd learned to keep that locked away where it couldn't touch his professional life, his public face, the version of himself he showed the world. But Lena wasn't the world. She was someone who understood loss and fear and the impossible task of keeping a child safe in a world that wanted to hurt them. Her response came quickly. "I'm so sorry about your wife. And thank you for understanding. Everyone keeps saying Izzy will forget about today, but I don't think she will. How do you help them move past something like this?" Jackson walked toward baggage claim, typing as he went. "You don't make them move past it. You sit with them in it. You let them be scared and angry and confused. You answer their questions honestly. And you show up every single day until they believe again that showing up is what people do." That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also the job, and you're clearly good at it, despite what happened today. How do you know that? Because Izzy trusted you enough to run straight to you when you appeared. Kids who aren't loved don't run toward their parents, they run away. There was a long pause. Jackson collected his suitcase from the carousel, checking his phone every few seconds. When her response finally came, it was longer than the others. "Thank you for saying that. I've been replaying this afternoon in my head, thinking about every way I failed her. But you're right, she ran to me. She forgave me before I even finished apologizing. Maybe I need to forgive myself too." "Maybe you do. Can I ask you something? Why did you stop to help her?" "Most people would have walked away. Most people probably did walk away." "What made you different?" Jackson stood in the middle of baggage claim, travelers rushing past him on all sides. The question should have been easy to answer, because it was the right thing to do. Because she needed help. Because any decent person would have done the same. But the truth was more complicated. He'd stopped because Izzy's question had cut through every defense he'd spent 6 years building. "Are you lost too, mister?" She'd seen something in his face, recognized something in his eyes, and in that recognition, he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever, the ability to connect with another human being on a level deeper than surface pleasantries. He typed carefully. She asked if I was lost too, and I realized I was. I've been lost for 6 years. I just hadn't admitted it until a 5-year-old pointed it out. Her response came immediately. "I've been lost for 3 years, since my divorce, since becoming a single parent, since learning that the person you build a life with can just decide one day that they don't want it anymore." That's exactly it. Maybe we're both still lost, just in different airports. Jackson smiled despite himself. Maybe. Or maybe being lost is just the default state, and occasionally we bump into people who remind us where we're supposed to be going. Is that what I did? Reminded you where you're going? He thought about that question as he walked through the terminal toward ground transportation. Where was he going? To his empty house in the suburbs, to his daughter who barely saw him because he worked 80-hour weeks, to a life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. "You reminded me that I'm capable of showing up for someone," he typed. "That's more valuable than you know. Well, you showed up when it mattered most. That has to count for something, maybe. Listen, I know we're just two strangers who met during a crisis, and I know this is probably weird, me texting you like we're friends or something, but I don't have a lot of people in my life right now. My ex took most of our friends in the divorce. My mother is in the hospital, and you're the only person who understands what happened today." Jackson's finger hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment to establish boundaries, to politely extract himself from this situation before it became complicated. He had enough complications in his life. He didn't need to add a traumatized single mother and her daughter to the list. But when he started typing, different words appeared. "You're not weird, and I'm glad you reached out. If you ever need to talk about today, about being a single parent, about anything, I'm here. Thank you. That means more than you know. Where do you live? You said something about Melville earlier. Long Island, New Jersey, about 2 hours away." There was a pause, and Jackson could feel the weight of that distance settling between them. 2 hours, close enough to matter, far enough to be impractical, close enough to wonder what if, far enough to make what if complicated. 2 hours isn't that far, Lena typed. People commute longer than that for work. True. I'm not suggesting anything, I just mean, if you ever wanted to check on Izzy, or if Nina ever wanted to meet the girl her dad helped at the airport, or if you just wanted coffee with another single parent who gets it, 2 hours isn't impossible. Jackson stood outside the terminal, cold November air hitting his face. The parking shuttle pulled up, but he didn't board it. He stayed frozen on the sidewalk, staring at his phone, reading her message over and over. This was dangerous territory. He'd built his life around emotional distance for good reason. Getting close to people meant getting hurt when they left. And everyone left eventually. Celine had left. His parents had left. Everyone he'd ever loved had found a way to disappear. But Lena wasn't asking him to fall in love. She was asking for coffee, for a connection between two people who understood what it meant to raise a child alone, for a friendship built on shared experience rather than romantic fantasy. He could do that, couldn't he? Coffee sounds good, he typed. Once things settle down with your mother and CPS, no pressure, no expectations, just two single parents figuring out this impossible job together. I'd like that. Me too. The shuttle driver honked. Jackson climbed aboard, his phone still in his hand. Other passengers talked around him, but he barely heard them. His mind was already racing ahead, imagining conversations they might have, comparing notes on parenting strategies, sharing the burden that felt impossibly heavy when carried alone. He thought about Nina, waiting at home with the babysitter. She'd ask about his trip. She'd tell him about her day. They'd go through their nightly routine, dinner, homework, bath, bed, the same schedule they'd followed for 6 years, the predictable rhythm that kept them both afloat. But maybe, just maybe, there was room in that routine for something new, something that didn't replace what they'd lost but added to what they had, a connection that made the burden lighter instead of heavier. His phone buzzed one more time. Thank you, Jackson, for everything. I'm glad Izzy asked if you were lost too. He smiled, typing his response. Me too, Lena. Me too. The shuttle pulled into the long-term parking lot. Jackson gathered his things, found his car, and started the drive home. But for the first time in 6 years, he didn't feel like he was just going through motions. He felt like he was moving towards something instead of away from everything. And that small shift, from running to walking, from hiding to seeking, felt like the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. Could two lost people help each other find the way home? 3 days passed before Jackson heard from Lena again. He'd thought about texting her a dozen times, always stopping himself before hitting send. She had enough to deal with. Her mother's recovery, the CPS home visit, Izzy's lingering fear. She didn't need him crowding her life with unnecessary check-ins. But on Thursday evening, while Nina worked on math homework at the kitchen table, his phone lit up with her name. CPS visit went well. They're closing the case. Izzy is doing better. She actually let me go to the bathroom alone today without crying. Small victories. Jackson felt tension he didn't know he'd been carrying release from his shoulders. That's great news. How's your mother? Coming home tomorrow. She'll need physical therapy, but the doctors say she should make a full recovery. I'm trying to figure out how to balance caring for her and working and keeping Izzy's life stable. It's a lot. I can imagine. Actually, that's why I'm texting. I know this is probably too much to ask, but do you remember that coffee you mentioned? I could really use an adult conversation with someone who understands what it's like to juggle everything alone. Jackson looked at Nina, her tongue sticking out slightly as she concentrated on long division. Mrs. Patterson, his regular babysitter, was available most evenings. Nina would be fine for a few hours. This was a reasonable thing to do. Meet a friend for coffee, share experiences, build a support network. So why did his hands shake as he typed his response? Saturday afternoon, there's a place called Common Grounds in Princeton. Halfway between us. Perfect. 2 p.m. See you then. He set his phone down and returned his attention to Nina's homework. She looked up at him with Celine's eyes, and for a moment, guilt washed over him. Was he betraying his wife's memory by meeting another woman for coffee? Was he opening himself up to pain Nina would have to witness when it inevitably fell apart? But Lena wasn't Celine. This wasn't romance. This was two parents helping each other survive the impossible task of raising children alone in a world that didn't make space for their grief. Saturday arrived cold and clear. Jackson dropped Nina at her grandmother's house. Celine's mother, who still looked at him with eyes that said he should have done more, should have saved her daughter somehow. He never stayed long during these drop-offs. The weight of her unspoken accusations made breathing difficult. He arrived at Common Grounds 15 minutes early and ordered a black coffee he didn't need. The cafe was busy with weekend crowds, college students with laptops, couples on first dates, families with young children. He found a table by the window and waited. Lena walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her curly hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired but less frantic than she'd been at the airport. Her eyes scanned the cafe until they landed on him, and her face broke into a genuine smile. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course. How are you holding up?" She ordered a latte from the passing waitress, then turned her full attention to him. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. My mother is recovering, but she's stubborn about accepting help. Izzy still has nightmares about the airport. Work is piling up because I've missed so many days. And my ex keeps texting me about why he should get full custody now that there's a CPS report in my file." Jackson felt anger flash through him. "He used your identity to board a plane, and he's trying to use that incident against you? Apparently, he's arguing that if I can't keep track of our daughter for an hour, I shouldn't have primary custody." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The irony is almost impressive. "What did your lawyer say?" "That it won't go anywhere. The CPS case is closed. Security footage proves he stole my ticket. And he hasn't been involved in Izzy's life for 3 years. But it still keeps me up at night, you know. The fear that one mistake could cost me everything." Jackson knew that fear intimately. He lived with it every day. The terror that something would happen to Nina, that he'd fail her the way he'd failed Celine, that one moment of not paying attention would result in losing the only person he had left. "You're a good mother," he said firmly. "What happened at the airport was a mistake during a crisis. It doesn't define you." "How do you know I'm a good mother? You spent an hour with my daughter in the worst moment of both our lives." "Exactly. I saw how Izzy talked about you, how she trusted that you'd come back even when she was terrified. And I saw how you looked when you found her. You didn't make excuses. You didn't blame her. You just held her and promised to do better. That's what good parents do." Lena's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." They talked for 3 hours. The coffee shop emptied and refilled around them, but neither noticed. They compared notes on parenting strategies, shared horror stories about judgmental relatives, laughed about the absurdity of single-parent dating apps. They talked about loss, Lena's divorce, Jackson's grief, the different ways they'd learned to survive when their lives fell apart. "Sometimes I look at Izzy," Lena said quietly, "and I wonder if I'm enough, if one parent can really do the job that's supposed to take two, if she's missing out on something essential because her father chose to leave." "Nina asks about Celine sometimes," Jackson replied. "She wants to know what her mother was like, what she smelled like, what her voice sounded like." And I try to answer, but the truth is, those memories are fading for both of us. I'm terrified that one day Celine will just be a story I tell Nina instead of a person we both remember. That's my biggest fear, too, that Izzy will grow up and realize I wasn't enough, that she needed more than I could give her. Jackson reached across the table and covered Lena's hand with his own. The gesture was automatic, instinctive, and the moment he did it, he realized how long it had been since he'd touched another person with genuine connection. "You are enough." Being enough doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up, even when it's hard. And you do that every day. Lena turned her hand over, letting their palms press together. Her fingers were cold from holding her latte, but her grip was firm. "You show up too. For Nina. For Izzy when she needed someone. For me right now, that counts for something. They sat like that for a long moment, hands connected across the table, two people who'd been alone for so long they'd forgotten what connection felt like. It wasn't romantic, or maybe it was, in the quietest possible way. It was recognition, understanding, the relief of finally being seen by someone who didn't need explanations. "Can I tell you something?" Lena asked. "Something I haven't told anyone else?" "Of course." The real reason I panicked at the airport wasn't just my mother's stroke. It was the call before that. My ex had just texted me saying he was taking me back to court for custody. I was already spiraling when the hospital called. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I made a choice that could have cost me everything. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I'm so tired of being strong, of making every decision alone, of carrying all the weight by myself, and I'm terrified that one day I'll just break under the pressure." Jackson squeezed her hand. "Then don't carry it alone anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean this. Us, whatever this is. Two single parents who understand what the other is going through. Someone to call when the weight gets too heavy. Someone who won't judge you for having a bad day or making a mistake or just needing to fall apart for 5 minutes. Lena's eyes searched his face. "Are you saying you want to be friends?" "I'm saying I think we already are." A smile broke across her face, genuine and warm. "I'd like that. I really would." They stayed at the cafe until closing time, when a patient waitress finally suggested they might want to continue their conversation elsewhere. They walked out into the cold November evening, breath fogging in the air between them. "This was really nice," Lena said, wrapping her coat tighter. "I didn't realize how much I needed this until right now." "Me too." "Same time next week?" "Absolutely." They stood in the parking lot for another few minutes, neither quite ready to leave. It felt like ending the conversation meant returning to their separate lives, to the loneliness that waited in empty houses and silent evenings after their daughters went to bed. "Jackson," Lena said as he reached for his car door, "thank you for seeing me, for understanding, for not making me feel crazy for needing this." "You're not crazy. You're human. And humans aren't meant to do this alone." He drove home thinking about her words, about the weight she carried, about the fear in her voice when she talked about breaking under pressure. He understood that fear. He lived it every day. But maybe with someone else who understood, the weight wouldn't feel quite so crushing. Maybe two people carrying half the burden each was better than one person carrying it all. When he picked up Nina from her grandmother's house, she asked him why he was
Just
smiling.
had a
good day, he said. "You should have more good days, Daddy. You look happier." Out of the mouths of babes, she was right. He did look happier. He felt happier. For the first time in 6 years, he felt like something other than a ghost moving through his own life. And it had all started with a little girl in a red coat, asking if he was lost too. What would the next chapter bring? 6 weeks passed in a rhythm of coffee meetings and text conversations that filled the spaces between Jackson's work and parenting. Every Saturday afternoon, he drove to Princeton and met Lena at Common Grounds. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, movies they'd seen, frustrations with their exes, small victories with their daughters. Somewhere in those 6 weeks, the grief that had felt like a permanent weight began to lighten, not disappear. Grief never disappears, but shift into something more manageable, something he could carry without it consuming him. Nina noticed the change too. She started asking about Daddy's friend Lena and whether she'd ever get to meet Izzy, the brave girl from the airport. Jackson promised they would eventually, when the time was right. That time came the week before Christmas. Lena called him on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight with stress. "Izzy's school is having a winter concert tomorrow night, and my mother just fell and broke her wrist. I have to take her to the emergency room, but Izzy has been practicing her song for weeks. I can't miss it, but I can't leave my mother alone either. I'm completely stuck." Jackson didn't hesitate. "I'll go to the concert. I'll record it for you and make sure Izzy knows you're there in spirit. You don't even know her school, and it's an hour from your house, and text me the address. I'll be there." He arrived at Melville Elementary School with 10 minutes to spare. The auditorium was packed with parents holding phones and cameras, all trying to capture their children's performances. He found a seat near the back and scanned the program until he found Izzy's name, Izzy Carter, grade K, Jingle Bells. When her class walked onto the stage, he spotted her immediately. She wore a green velvet dress and a headband with reindeer antlers. She looked so much more confident than the terrified little girl he'd met at the airport. She'd grown in 6 weeks, not just physically, but in the way she carried herself. The kindergartners sang off-key and adorable, and Jackson recorded every second. When Izzy hit her solo line, she belted it out with the confidence of someone who'd decided being scared wasn't worth it anymore. Several parents laughed fondly. Jackson felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. After the concert, he waited by the auditorium doors. Parents and children streamed past, everyone bundled in winter coats and chattering about hot chocolate and Christmas cookies. Then he saw her, Izzy, walking with her teacher, scanning the crowd with disappointed eyes. "Izzy?" he called out. Her head whipped around. For a moment, confusion crossed her face. Then recognition hit, and her whole expression transformed into pure joy. "Mr. Jackson!" She ran toward him and crashed into his legs with the force of a small, enthusiastic missile. "You came! But where's my mommy?" He knelt down to her level. "Your mommy had an emergency with your grandma. She wanted to be here more than anything, but she asked me to come instead and record your performance. And Izzy, you were amazing." Her bottom lip trembled. "She missed it? She'll see it tonight, I promise. And she's going to be so proud of you." Izzy's teacher approached, clearly confused about who this strange man was. Jackson quickly explained the situation, showing texts from Lena confirming his identity and permission to be there. The teacher relaxed but stayed close, protecting her student as she should. "Can I see the video?" Izzy asked. "I want to make sure you got my solo." Jackson pulled out his phone and played the recording. Izzy watched herself with the critical eye of a performer, nodding at the good parts, cringing at a moment where she forgot the words. When it ended, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Will you show my mommy this tonight? I'll send it to her right now." He did, and within seconds, his phone rang. Lena's voice cracked with emotion. "I just watched it. She was perfect. Thank you so much for being there. She's disappointed you missed it," Jackson said honestly. "But she understands. Can you put her on the phone?" He handed the phone to Izzy, who immediately started talking a mile a minute about her costume and her solo and how she'd only messed up one tiny word that nobody probably noticed. Jackson watched her face light up as her mother praised her, and he felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about helping a friend anymore. This was about building something, a network, a community, a chosen family of people who showed up for each other when biology and marriage and traditional structures failed. After Izzy finished talking to Lena, she handed the phone back to Jackson. Her teacher had moved a polite distance away, giving them space but keeping them in sight. "Mr. Jackson," Izzy said quietly, "are you my mommy's boyfriend?" The question caught him completely off guard. "No, sweetheart, I'm just her friend. But you came to my concert. That's what dads do." The words hit him like a physical blow. That's what dads do. She'd just defined fatherhood in the simplest possible terms. Showing up when it matters, being present, caring enough to drive an hour on a weeknight to watch a kindergarten concert. "Your mommy and I are friends," he said carefully. "And friends help each other. That's what I'm doing, helping." Okay. She seemed to accept this explanation, but something in her eyes said she was filing it away for future consideration. "Will you come to my next concert?" "If your mommy needs me to, absolutely." "Good." She hugged him again, quick and fierce, then ran back to her teacher. She waved at him as they walked away, her reindeer antlers bouncing with each step. Jackson sat in his car for a long moment before starting the engine. That's what dads do. Izzy's innocent observation had exposed a truth he'd been avoiding for weeks. He wasn't just helping a friend, he was becoming invested in this little girl's life. And the more invested he became, the more vulnerable he made himself to loss. His phone buzzed. "Lena, can you come by the house? I just got back from the hospital and I'd like to talk in person if you have time." He should go home, should establish boundaries. He should protect himself and Nina from getting too attached to people who might disappear. But he was already typing the address into his GPS. Lena's house was a small ranch in a middle-class neighborhood. with Christmas lights strung haphazardly across the porch and a plastic snowman tipped over in the yard. She opened the door before he could knock, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," she said, pulling him into a hug right there on the doorstep. "Thank you for being there when I couldn't. Thank you for recording it. Thank you for making her smile." Jackson held her carefully, aware that this was different from their previous interactions. This felt more intimate, more significant. When she pulled back, she didn't let go completely. Her hands stayed on his arms. "You want to come in? My mother's sleeping, and Izzy's at a neighbor's house finishing homework. We could actually talk without interruption for once." He followed her inside. The house was small but warm, filled with the comfortable clutter of a life being lived. Izzy's artwork on the fridge, textbooks stacked on the coffee table, a half-decorated Christmas tree in the corner. They sat on the couch, and Lena poured them both wine from a bottle that looked like it had been opened weeks ago. She took a long sip, then set her glass down and turned to face him. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to be honest with me about how you feel." Jackson's stomach clenched. "Okay. I think I'm falling for you. Not in the dramatic sweep-me-off-my-feet way, in the quiet, everyday way. In the way where I realize that when something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell. When something bad happens, you're the first person I want to call. And tonight, when I couldn't be there for my daughter, you showed up without hesitation. That means something." She paused, gathering courage. "I know you're still grieving. I know we agreed this was just friendship. And if that's all it can ever be, I'll accept that. But I needed you to know that for me, it's become more. And if there's any chance you feel the same way." Jackson kissed her, not because he'd planned to, not because he'd thought it through, but because the words she was saying matched feelings he'd been trying to ignore for weeks. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm terrified," he whispered. "I'm terrified of losing someone again. I'm terrified of letting Nina get attached to you and Izzy and then having it fall apart. I'm terrified that I'll mess this up and hurt everyone involved." "I'm terrified too," Lena replied, "but I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life alone because I was too scared to take a chance." They sat there on her couch, holding each other in the dim light of her half-decorated Christmas tree. Two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way. Two people who'd been lost until a little girl asked a simple question that changed everything. "We should take this slow," Jackson said finally, "for the kids' sake. Make sure this is real before we involve them." "Agreed. Slow, careful, but not avoidant. Not avoidant." They talked until midnight about what slow meant, about how to protect their daughters while exploring this connection, about the fears and hopes and possibilities that came with choosing to let someone in after years of keeping everyone out. When Jackson finally drove home, exhausted and confused and happier than he'd been in years, he thought about that day at the airport, about how one moment of choosing to help a stranger had led to 6 weeks of friendship, to falling for someone he'd never expected to meet, to the possibility of a future that wasn't defined by loss. Maybe fate was real. Maybe the universe did push people together when they needed each other most. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe two lost people had found each other, and that was enough. Either way, Jackson Reed was no longer wandering through life like a ghost. He was present. He was living. He was allowing himself to hope again. And it had all started with a 5-year-old girl in a red coat, asking if he was lost too. The answer, he realized now, was yes, but he wasn't lost anymore. If you enjoyed this story about unexpected connections, second chances, and the courage to love again despite past wounds, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring tale. These stories remind us that sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest changes in our lives. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on Jackson and Lena's journey. Have you ever had a chance encounter that changed your life? Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it today. Thank you for being part of our community, and remember, you're never as lost